The story of Duet Night Abyss doesn't begin with the Empire, and it definitely doesn't begin with the Church, or the filthoids, or even our two protagonists. No, the story of Duet Night Abyss begins long before any of that. It begins with the world itself. With a force far older than the Hyperborean Empire, far older than the Alysian Church, and even older than the humans and Charons who now fill its cities. It begins with the Heaven Trees. These massive crystalline pillars pierce the sky like ancient monuments left behind by something far beyond mortal understanding. They are impossibly tall, the roots reaching into depths unknown, and they radiate a mysterious substance called Foxine. The core of nearly everything in the game, every conflict, and every miracle in this world, and is of course the premium currency for getting characters. But you already know that. You can think of Foxine as some kind of divine elemental mineral. It fuels magic, it powers machines, it builds nations, and it divides them. Over the centuries, life in Atlasia learned to depend on Foxine so deeply that entire civilizations rose because of it, and it also fell. Because where there is power, someone always tries to claim it. And that's how everything here began. Hey guys, what's up? Aru. And welcome to the lore of Duet Night Abyss. Now, I tried this game a few weeks ago, and I'm happy to announce that I enjoyed the story, and I'm very much invested in the lore of this game as well. So here's to the very first DNA video on the channel. Now, I won't spend any more time as I've already told you the premise of this video, so without further ado, let's get started. Long before the wars and the borders and the propaganda from different regions, Atlasia was simply a land of many diverse peoples. Most of humanity lived in the south, and the majority of the Charons lived in the northern frigid lands, and the Lunarians wandered its forests untouched by age or decay, all under the Heaven Tree. And for the most part, these groups existed without conflict. Charons weren't feared as monsters, and neither them nor humans were dominant, and Lunarians were simply part of the world. Everyone lived scattered across the continent, gathering Foxine the traditional way, through manual labor and careful extraction, long before industrial advancements turned into a greedy, empire-shaping resource. But like all ancient worlds, Atlasia experienced a turning point, a moment that split history into before and after, and that moment came from the south, in the land of humans. Thousands of years ago, a new belief system took root, the faith of the Nine. The Alysian Church began preaching that Foxine wasn't just a natural resource, but a divine gift, a sacred miracle mineral forged by the gods. According to their teachings, the Heaven Trees weren't natural formations at all. They were holy pillars left by the Nine to guide civilization into the future, viewing these colossal trees as mineral structures where every form of Foxine energies come from instead of living trees. This belief spread rapidly until the church became a 1,300-year-old theocracy controlling the entire southern continent. Basically, the church made Foxine into a special item designated for the divine and blessed. But the church didn't just rule with faith, it also ruled with discriminating hierarchy. During this time, society was divided into castes according to divine blessing, and your role in life was determined the moment you were born. You can see that even from 1,000 years ago, mortal discrimination was already a deeply inherited stigma. In the Alysian Church, some were highborn and revered, while some were lowborn and restricted. And some were considered special, very special. Because to the church, the Charons were called children of divinity, blessed with an innate potential humans didn't have, which is the aptitude for Foxine energy, granting them magical, divine abilities. Highly praised and highly respected, almost seen as divine envoys of the Nine. However, this special treatment didn't just elevate the Charons, it also isolated them, and worst of all, put them in the spotlight. After some time, as the church tightened its control and Foxine shortages got worse, resentment built among the human population, the Solarians specifically. They saw favoritism, they saw inequality, and the church doubled down on its ideology, revering the uniqueness of the Charons and seeing them as blessed by the Heaven Tree, while everything else was simply existing alongside them. Eventually, this resentment of the Solarians ignited into a rebellion. But not the rebellion that you might think. Not the Charon rebellion that you've been told, because that happened way after what I'm going to discuss. The people who rejected the church, oppressed Solarians, exiled nobles, frustrated scholars, and even wealthy dissidents fled north in a movement known as the Great Migration. They journeyed through harsh climates and unforgiving terrain, becoming a wary expedition of Solarian peoples. Finally, they arrived far north at a small, peaceful snowland region near the Lamenting Lake. Here, simple Charon clans lived in small scattered villages, warming themselves with foxine from the nearby Heaven Tree, surviving on what little they had, but surviving peacefully, and keeping their settlements small due to the deadly results of deterioration within large populations. The Charons pitied the Solarian refugees who were clearly ill-equipped for the brutal northern winter. So in their nature, the Charon ancestors took the Solarians in, gave them food, and provided shelter. But the cold didn't kill these Solarian refugees. It only fed their greed and hatred against the very races that they despised. The Solarian expedition and the Great Migration was led by two brothers, Gallia, their seemingly harmless leader, and his greedy brother Soranus. The moment Soranus stepped into the Charon village, his eyes went straight for the Charons' granaries and began plotting plunder and murder. On the night meant for peace, during a feast that the Charons prepared for their guests, the brute Soranus had his blades and shields ready and struck, attacking the unknowing Charons who were simply offering aid to their newfound friends from the south. And by dawn, except for a handful of Charon hunters hunting in the wilds, none were left alive in the villages. Gallia then built the city of Ice Lake on the Charons' graves, and from the fortress rose a new power forged in betrayal, the Hyperborean Empire, now ruled by the greedy and first emperor Soranus. Forged through violence, shaped by necessity, and hardened by survival, the empire stood in direct opposition to the other great power, the Alysian Church. Unlike the theocracy, the empire believed that strength was absolute, progress was survival, and foxine, as well as the heaven trees, weren't a holy mineral. It was a revolutionary tool used for technological advancement and conquest. That's why everything within the game, or at least here in the north, is powered by foxine. Even the demon wedges that you use to enhance your characters is actually invented by the empire's very own alchemical academy, who, if you finish the game, is also responsible for creating filthoid Charon abominations like Blues and Fantasio, and many other sad monsters. And in this new northern worldview fabricated by Solarians, Charons weren't divine. They were dangerous, enslaved, and branded as sinners and monsters to be used as tools in fighting the southern nation. Sometime during Soranus' rule, he was assassinated by a Charon, sparking what is essentially the start of the Charon Rebellion in the north, the Charon Rebellion and the Solarian-Charon War, which is blared into our ears time and time again throughout the story, resulting in the slaughtering defeat of the Charons by the hands of the so-called just Solarians. The war between these two races was recorded in the Silver Candle hymns in dramatic detail, which was finally ended by Gallia, a person you might have heard of within the story as the second emperor and the current ruler of Hyperborea, who is mentioned to have aimed for peace after basically committing near genocide to the majority of the Charon race. Whether or not the story of the Silver Candle hymns is accurate or was simply a fabricated story of the winners is still up to debate. What started as a simple feast offered by the Charons to the freezing Solarians thousands of years ago turned into a bloodbath of betrayal and pillaging of what was initially owned by the Charon peoples. This feast would reflect the current-day celebration of the Solarians and the unknowing Charons of today as the Silver Candle Carnival, where the true origins of the Silver Candle hymns and the Charon Rebellion was covered by a song to their newly crowned king, Gallia. And so we move to the current day. The monsters we now know as filthoids stalk the land all over Alysia, driven by instinct and mutation. But underneath their monstrous frames lies a truth almost too cruel to accept. Filthoids actually come from Charons, a byproduct or corrupted state of the Charon race rather than a separate species with its own origin. You could say that every single filthoid you see was once a Charon, but not all Charons are filthoids. When a Charon matures, they undergo awakening, a natural process meant to reveal their latent abilities. Most of the Charons awaken normally, while some develop powerful talents, and these are what many would call daemons. Every playable character in the roster is a Charon daemon except for Daphne and the Solarian captain. But not all Charons are so lucky to get such great magical ability, and neither are daemons safe from it, because a portion of awakened and awakening Charons suffer a catastrophic failure called deterioration. Their bodies reject the awakening process, their minds and their senses get fractured, and their phoxine-saturated blood mutates, eventually transforming them into filthoids. And what's worse is you never know who among the Charon citizens could be suffering from deterioration. Even among our closest friends, a filthoid could emerge beneath their smiling, happy faces. Psyche. To the Empire of Hyperborea, this justified their fear and fueled their hate for the Charons even more, who now lived in the slums and outer districts of their glorious empire. And to the Alysian Church, it was a stain on their doctrine, a symbol of monstrous corrupted creatures devolved from what was supposed to be children of divinity. And to the Charons themselves, it was nothing but a tragedy that they did not choose, and neither did they know why this happened to them. Suddenly, the race that once lived peacefully was hunted, demonized, and now seemingly an endangered species. Filthoids became propaganda tools, while Charons became political scapegoats that even the Charons themselves start fighting over. And the world entered centuries of division, a division that would eventually shape every part of the story. Now, one thing to note with the Church and the Empire is that the Alysian Church does not view Charons specifically as monsters. They still see them as a divine and uniquely peculiar race blessed by the Heaven Tree. But seeing a Charon succumb to deterioration and becoming a filthoid is viewed as a corruption of a Charon's divinity, and only then will they resort to putting down a filthoid, maybe as an act of mercy. This is why you see Charons with divinely named powers and high statuses like Lisbel and Samuel, who we currently know as part of the 7 virtues, specifically the virtue of patience. Compared to the deep-seated hatred and generational envy of the Solarians in the Hyperborean Empire, who once viewed Charons as a favorite of the Church, of which they now view as below them and even lower once they become filthoids or demons, calling them demon children and considering even laureled Charons as a stain in their empire's military name, a reverse perspective of what the Church views as children of divinity. This is why you have characters like Blues or Avar, and now Rhythm, laureled Charons who simply fed the hatred of Solarian generals, scapegoats to fuel political power of higher nobles, or used as guinea pigs for alchemical heresy, with the only seemingly untouchable legion being the 11th, which is run and led by Charons, specifically Sybil and her officers. As these tensions grew, 2 great powers solidified their control over the world: the Alysian Church in the south and the Hyperborean Empire in the north. The Church ruled through faith, hierarchy, and divine doctrine, while the Empire ruled through militaristic discipline, technology, iron authority, and historical disdain. Their hatred for each other spanned generations, but even as their ideologies clashed, both shared a single fear: the filthoids. Both factions had their own views on Charons, but understood the monsters that they could become. Both feared and revered, and most of all, craved for what Phoxine could do. And neither would back down in the current era's conflict of 2 nations. Atlasia became a continent shaped by oppression, rebellion, fear, and secrets buried beneath centuries of conflict. Yet the world is not defined solely by these 2 monoliths. Independent nations and traditions influenced the story from other regions. The ancient Washu region preserved philosophies older than both the Empire and the Church, probably reaching the origins of the Charons and Lunarians, while the musical Republic of Lucca and its deserts stands as a diplomatic nation navigating political tension with delicate neutrality. And the Forsaken, now rising as the second coming of what was once the Charon Rebellion, eager to topple the empire that destroyed their northern land. Each faction held a different version of the truth, but none of them saw the full picture, at least not until a duet of protagonists entered the story. The current story of Duet Night Abyss unfolds through the eyes of 2 characters living parallel lives. The first is the Fox Hunter, the protagonist raised far from politics, living a quiet life with Berenica on a remote island of Purgatorio. Their world was small, peaceful, and blissfully unaware of the continent's turmoil, until the Empire arrived and until the filthoids coincidentally attacked their settlement. Their village was destroyed in a single violent night, and Berenica was abducted, marked as number 0, while the fox hunter washed ashore in the Empire's territory, alone and stripped of everything familiar. Through the fox hunter's eyes, we witness the cruelty of the Empire, the devastating consequences of discrimination, and the everyday suffering endured by Charon communities. Meanwhile, the second protagonist, the Solarian captain, tells a very different story, serving as an officer in the ever-so-stressful political ladder of the Hyperborean Empire's 13th Legion, continuing the second half of the game, upholding the Empire's doctrine with unwavering loyalty. To the Solarians, Charons are unpredictable, filthoids are proof of that danger, and the Empire is the only force capable of maintaining order. But as their story unfolds, the pillars of their belief begin to crack. They discover that the Empire's truth is incomplete and even fabricated to some degree, shaped by fear, greed, propaganda, and carefully controlled knowledge. Their journey mirrors the gradual unraveling of the origin of their conflicts, the slow and theatrical uncovering of the true past that I think is the main revelation in our dreams. The truth uncovered by the second protagonist is likely going to shed light on the events that transpired when Solarians first came to northern Atlasia, a truth that has been hinted to us in many parts of the main story on each of the protagonists' perspectives. And it seems like we'll be getting a glimpse of that truth from the different regions we'll be visiting as well, but that discussion is for another time. For now, that's the lore of Duet Night Abyss explained. I hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into this new game's lore. This was honestly just the surface of the lore that I've found from items and books from the game, and the same goes for the character lore and how I could barely connect them to the main conflict. So in the next lore video for Duet Night Abyss, I might end up backtracking or even clarifying some details I mentioned here. The next video I'm making for this game is a little playthrough/review of my experience, and I hope you guys watch that as well, since it really highlights how easy this game is even for a casual lore player like me who barely spent any time sweating and min-maxing my account. But that's gonna be it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one, and as always, stay mad theorists. Bye!